everyone. How nice to welcome Denise Baden to the show. Author, activist, creator, professor of sustainable business at the University of Southampton, pioneered positive stories and behaviors on climate and nature. And we're going to hear a bit more about that today. So, Denise, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your home place and, where your roots are, really.
Okay, well, I guess I'm rooted on the south coast. I kind of went to the University of Southampton when I was a student, went off up to London, gathered about, but I was drawn back because it's a very diverse city, very sort of mixed group of people and lots of greenery. Yeah, so that's where I'm based.
Lovely, great, and a good base to start to think about um, uh, as your professor of sustainable business, how you turn the sort of objectives that our economy has into thinkings about kind of culture, word, story, and there's an interesting kind of
Yeah.
transition back and forth between the two of those, isn't there?
Well, that's how I got into story. I kind of, so few people read any articles I wrote on business ethics or sustainable business. And I actually then started thinking of how can I find more innovative ways to move beyond engaging those who choose to take these always optional modules. So that's one of the ways I got into fiction and a number of the other projects that we might get to talk about.
Lovely. Well, that's a great start. Well, how about we start with the Green Stories Project, and talk a little bit about the power of story, how that came about, how you launched that, and that's led on to a whole range of other exciting things as well. But tell us a little bit about that kind of emergence of that as an idea.
Sure. Well, it arose out of some research, funnily enough, when I discovered that teaching business ethics wasn't making my students any more ethical. And and I did some research and I found that the typical way of teaching by using cautionary tales of ethics scandals wasn't actually that effective. So I switched to using positive role models and sort of stories of social entrepreneurs or ethical business leaders. And it was way more successful. And I did quite a lot of research showing that that approach, the positive story approach with real examples, gave people agency, reduced cynicism. Cynicism was absolutely associated with unethical behavior. And I looked into the news as well and traditional news versus constructive journalism. And I found the same thing. And I looked into how people responded to stories as well, like climate fiction, comparing dystopian, catastrophe focused with solution focused. And again, I found the same thing. You know, showing how terrible things will be if we do nothing did motivate some, but just as many were switched off. Whereas the more positive ones motivated everybody. And I thought, oh my God, we're doing it all wrong. And, most stuff is preaching to the converted, only those who choose to engage in it. And two, it takes a problem-focused approach, which can leave you feeling depressed, hopeless, anxious. So I thought I wanted to create a resource to encourage writers, because if you want to communicate, engage writers, yeah. So I filled it with all kinds of sustainable solutions, climate policies, and so on, the ones that will actually work, not the greenwashing kind. And it basically encouraged writers through competitions and various projects to include them in their stories. And we've run 21 free competitions now. It gave birth to Habitat Press, which is an indie publisher that's published, I think we've got 11 or 12 books now to our name, all which either show positive visions of what a sustainable society might look like if we did things right, or showcases the kinds of policies that will get there, or kind of smuggle sustainable practices and values into sort of mainstream genre fiction. So I'm really, really proud of that.
Fantastic. I love that idea of smuggling stuff in. That is exactly the thing, isn't it? That if
Yeah,
you think it's about this thing over here, but you're hearing about some other thing
right.
in a indirect way and in a kind of sub-sound way almost,
Yeah.
they're going to work on the unconscious and the deeper parts of the mind when you're not thinking about it, perhaps. There are various kind of metaphors of how we think about that, but
Yes,
they
exactly.
you found that to be effective. Yeah.
Yes. Way more effective than dry facts or statistics, because we remember stuff embedded in a story and we relate to the characters. And so the characters, for a while, their values become our values. So it's a very powerful way to get across messages.
And I'm intrigued about this idea that that the positive stories have this potential to reach everybody because society is so kind of segmented and
Mm,
separated, and it's never just along a single spectrum. But if you think of kind of environmental behaviors and interests, there are people who get it and who are doing stuff, and there are people at this end who are actually quite small in number now, even though they're quite noisy, who are against it or are using the environmental climate nature narratives as a kind of
yeah,
weaponized form. And in the middle, what some people have called, Rupert Reed's called the climate majority, who are people who know about it but don't know what to do. But the potential for positive stories is to say, well, we're not just looking at the people who know stuff and who are doing stuff. You're kind of widening it right out. Is that right?
exactly. Yeah. And I think you mentioned the word agency, and that's absolutely crucial. So I found of all kinds of things that work, those showing characters doing sustainable things in a way that readers can emulate are the most effective at inspiring similar things.
Ah, okay, so there's something there of the reader, the audience seeing themselves in the story, or seeing a mirror of some kind of sort. They can see a character, context, a series of things happening, and they think, "Oh, that could be me, or that is me, even."
Yes, so you mentioned the first anthology, No More Fairy Tales, Stories to Save the Planet. Well, in there's a story about a murder set in a citizens' assembly on climate. And that's a great example because it's a whodunit. You know, you don't know who's going to get killed or who did it. But what you have is 8 people debating climate policies. Yeah. And so they all, and as citizens' assemblies are designed to be, they represent all kinds of different people, different classes, genders, ethnicities, ages. So they all respond to the different policies in different ways. So it's basically in business talk, I talk of it as a stakeholder analysis. But in dramatic form, especially when you're wondering who the murderer is, it's much more engaging and you can relate to all these different points of view. And that then got turned into a play, Murder in the Citizens' Jury. And we asked the audience at the end to vote on their favorite climate solution. And
No,
a key climate solution there was the citizens' assembly form of political participation itself, because I think our current, democracy tied to 4-year cycles, so co-opted by business interests, I think it's probably incapable of making sufficient movement on climate change. But people are getting really excited now about the potential of citizens' assemblies and getting direct political participation by a very representative group of people, informed by experts, much like in a jury.
yeah.
So it was a lovely way to raise the profile of that, as well as all the different characters. And we did research on the audience at the end, and they were really inspired by the ideas. And, you got lots of comments, oh, I didn't know about this, I will now explore that, and so on.
Fantastic. There's something about going. I love the idea of shifting into. You probably hadn't even thought about it at the beginning, had you? That these ideas might become a play one day and be performed in the dark to an audience, and in that dark in a theatre, also cinema, magic happens, doesn't it? People feel together, and yet they're focused on a thing in front of them. Something very different happens. I think it's a bit like sitting round the fireplace listening to stories that traditional human cultures did for hundreds of thousands, well, 400,000 years or
That's
something.
wonderful. I mean, it is adapted actually from a screenplay that won the Writing Climate Pitch Fest, and there were promises of Hollywood producers, but it's been a year now. I've not heard a thing. So I've given up on that. And at first I thought the play was kind of a sort of plan B. But oh my God, like working with actors, and they're only a local drama group. But seeing my characters come to life and be completely reinterpreted, and they ended up as an exact mix of the actor's interpretation and mine. And being involved in that whole process, I mean, I have no regrets now. And a sixth form then took it on and did a version. And so I think Lazy Bee produced it, but if anyone comes direct to me, I'm making it available royalty free for any student or amateur theatre group because it's perfect for them.
Fantastic. That letting go must be interesting as well, because we have we you know we put a lot of effort, I think, into writing, and it sometimes takes years to turn ideas into outcomes. And of course, when people are reading or watching or listening or whatever that particular context is, of course, that interpretation is theirs and no longer ours. But for somebody else to produce a new thing based on what you've done, they're going to make changes, and you're going to presumably you're looking at it and thinking, "Oh, that's interesting.
You're
That's no
so right.
longer mine."
Yeah, there was a moment in the early rehearsal where the actor, and I thought, no, you're doing it wrong. That's not how I see the character. And then I shut up. I made a decision to shut up. And it wasn't until the Q&A at the end of the performances where someone said, how are you all capturing your characters so perfectly? You must be, they must be exactly like you, that I realized they'd created new characters that with even more conviction than I could do, and that letting go was the best thing, to do in that situation. And yeah, it was nice because quite often as a writer, you're very lonely. So working with actors and the director was fabulous.
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, especially if it can be positive like that,
Yeah.
because those sort of experiences of people writing in green rooms under pressure and the kind of brutal nature of coming up with
Mm.
ideas that are shot down and all of that kind of stuff.
I'd
It's
love that.
kind of, yeah, tough all
That's my
around.
dream, to be sat around a table with like-minded creative people batting ideas around instead of just cackling to myself while walking in the park.
Lovely. Nice image. Well, what about your first novel then, Denise? So Habitat Man has
Yeah.
emerged very recently, and obviously the same first word as the title of the press that you were just telling us about. Tell us about your first novel and Habitat Man.
Well, that arose actually through slight dissatisfaction with the entries coming into the Green Stories competition, because no matter how much I made the remit clear, most of them still focused on the problem. And it was just before COVID, a guy set up a green garden consultancy. He'd retired early and he wanted to help people make their gardens wildlife friendly. And he said, I want to do this for the world. And he'd already shown me so much on pollinator friendly plants and avoiding pesticides, letting the grass grow and so on. And I thought, what a great idea. I thought of it initially as a TV series, but a novel is more achievable. And so that's the story. So he retires early. He sets up this project. He goes from garden to garden. He falls in love. He digs up a body. Um,
Cool.
and it's so fun. It's a sort of rom-com with a bit of cozy mystery. And I had people writing to me afterwards. So with the body, there's a nice opportunity for a natural burial scene. And people said it inspired them to change their will to have a natural burial. And then the university picked it up, did some research on readers, and of those, like 1 month after finishing the book, 60% had actually adopted one or more of the green alternatives. And 98% had adopted greener values and attitudes. So
Wow.
I had way more impact with that book.
Wow.
Then I had
Wow.
someone who was an award-winning radio writer said, I want to put this in for Radio 4 adaptation. I'll pitch it to my producer. It's a long shot. And the producer loved it. It's like, no, that's going to be my pitch for this slot. It got right to the final round. It got pipped to the post by some comedian who had their own vehicle. And but I really want it to be a TV series. I see Mackenzie Crook
Very good. Yeah.
because his approach of very like loving of humanity and nature and quirky, gentle comedy, perfect for this. So, Mackenzie, if you're listening, you'd be perfect Habitat Man.
We'll send out a link.
Yeah.
That's lovely about that impact. That feedback's fantastic. I mean, we all like to have feedback, don't we? And
Yeah.
though, those of us who sit in universities have seen the sort of evaluation of our works ramp up over the years with a
Yeah.
thing called the research assessment exercise and the research excellence framework and all of that kind of thing, and the pressure that comes with all of that. And yet there's still, I mean, there are efforts to change this, but there's still a gap between the things that are produced and the public and policy engagement. Some, in some disciplines more than others, but let me put it this way: universities are not very good at doing public engagement. And I speak as somebody who ran a centre on public and policy engagement for 5 years, but
I
we're
think
not
they're
that good. But it's
getting better. I mean, I cannot, in all conscience, agree with that from my position. So working for the University of Southampton, I keep expecting at any minute someone to say, "Stop what you're doing, Denise. You're supposed to be dealing with business." But instead, they're turning it into an impact case study. I've got little pots of money for public engagement exercises. And with that, I did a lovely project with BAFTA, hashtag climate characters, where we researched, we sent like surveys to media students, and we'd have these little like posts where we'd compare James Bond with his single-use sports car and walk-in wardrobe of luxury suits, with Jack Reacher, who travels by bus and shops in thrift shops, and one's got a huge carbon footprint to kill off the bad guys, and the other one hasn't. And it was about showing A, the influence of fictional characters on people, and B, helping people to realize the link between their behavior and what they aspire to and the planetary consequences. And that led into me feeding back to screenwriters on how to write characters in a way that's sort of engaging, but isn't promoting high carbon behavior as aspirational. And so, all that started with a little pot of public engagement money. So I
brilliant.
think we are getting better.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm being a bit unfair because I think we
Yeah,
can pick good examples from every
yeah,
institution. Uh, but that kind of immediate understanding of how you turn, as you were saying, people duck when they see data coming because
yeah.
that
I'm the same.
that's kind of,
Yeah.
and yet that's something that a lot of us have spent years learning to do and to do as well as we can. But what you've described there, I think it's really interesting that instead of coming up with a list of good ideas for behaviors and actions that address climate and nature recovery in some form or another, you said put them in characters, put
Yeah.
those things in the wherewithal of characters in story, and people then connect with the characters, and then they reflect back on themselves and they think, oh, I could do that thing
Yeah.
because that character is somebody I admire, like, or see myself in. And suddenly it becomes the character as the vehicle rather than the worthy good idea.
And it also looks more fun. You show the benefits of it. You show people enjoying it. So that natural burial scene was very beautiful. It was very peaceful. And then you think, oh my God, I didn't know that, how toxic the chemicals were in traditional burials and all that hardwood and deforestation. I hadn't made that link, but that's not what's grabbing people. What's grabbing them is experiencing that beautiful moment. So close to nature.
Yeah, exactly. Well, take that back into that kind of core
Mm.
stuff about sustainable business then. So just a couple of words on lots of efforts, business across the world to B Corps and appropriate reporting and a whole range of things, still in a system that doesn't value the costs it imposes upon environments and people in all sorts of ways, the externalities. And yet lots happening that's good and lots of people proud of what they're doing from within their context. Because after all, they're not just business people or people working in businesses, they're also family people and they're also in their communities. We have these multiple identities. Or do you think things that have moved a lot, or are we still kind of thinking it's better than it really is?
So I think there's a real danger in pretending we found a solution when we haven't. And most business sustainability solutions are don't buy this product, buy this other one that's more sustainable. And quite often it isn't. So I think we've made progress in realizing where the problem lies. So I think for a long time people thought, corporate social responsibility, ESG, environmental social governance, and these kind of metrics would do the trick. But businesses will game the system. Corporations are designed to be profit maximizing machines. They're like sharks chasing blood. So the CEO with the best will in the world might want to be sustainable, but if that ever, is intention with profit maximization, not profit sufficiency, profit maximization, they will be ousted or their firm will be subject to a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
And I think we all feel quite helpless because we're beginning to realize now it's the system. And these other things are just tinkering around the edges. And if anything, they're delaying us dealing with the problem by pretending to have solutions that don't really work.
Yes.
So, Jules, I think this might be a good time for me to talk about my latest project. Can I?
Yes, please do. Exactly. Good, good,
Right.
good
It's
segue.
tentatively and rather grandiosely draftly titled A Jigsaw to Save the World. And the reason I like the Jigsaw, and it's going to be, at the moment, it's a LinkedIn newsletter. I'm on edition 5 at the moment. It's going to be a book and an actual jigsaw. And the reason I like the idea of a jigsaw is on the front cover, you have the picture of the perfect flourishing society. You got the picture you want to achieve, yeah? And you just got to put the pieces of the puzzle in place, and they've got to link up properly, yeah? So the picture on the front of the jigsaw is a flourishing, sustainable society. The corner pieces are those systemic aspects that are locking us in that need to change if we're going to ever move anywhere. Yeah. So, for example, one might be corporations' business law to maximize profits. So, what if all corporations were benefit corporations or social enterprises? Now, only one country I know of has that. I don't know, maybe Bhutan, actually, but I was going to say maybe two. Cuba is one, but they've really been had an embargo and so on, but they're still managing to survive. So they can make it work. But what would that look like? So then you need to think in the long term, you could see that would make, a huge difference. In the short term, what about markets? What about pensions? What about jobs? So you need all the bits, a bit like a three-legged race, all the bits of the puzzle to sort of shift in sync so you don't fall over in the meantime. And I'm going to be running events to get together people who know to puzzle this out. But some of them are just going to be obvious. One of them is going to be the news. So I did a project on constructive journalism, finding actually that negative news giving rise to fear, anxiety, and pessimism is much less likely to lead to positive action than constructive journalism that shows people making a difference. So the more we feed into this, we're feeding fear and we're feeding the beast. But there's so many great stories of communities and community energy and local participation and bottom-up power. They don't ever bother to report. So constructive journalism will be a piece of the jigsaw. You'll have solar and renewable energy and forests and seagrass and, local food, all kinds of things. But there will be those systemic bits around the edges and in the corners. And I will be engaging people in sort of working out what those are and how they fit together. And then we end up with a jigsaw that probably in a number of versions. I can see it in care homes, in nurseries, in schools, in university classrooms, maybe some bits that just focus on politics, maybe citizens' assemblies could be a corner piece, I think, perhaps. And working out what those corner pieces are, I'll be using that as I'm going to apply for public engagement funds, I think, see if I can get them, fingers crossed,
Very
to
good.
engage young people in deciding what the pieces will be. So
Fantastic.
anyone who wants to follow it, just find me on LinkedIn and sign up to my newsletter. And I'm really keen to get comments and feedback on all the different parts of that puzzle.
Great. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes to that as well, so people can find it very easily. Brilliant. I think naming stuff, calling the thing constructive journalism actually helps to bring it to life. It
Yeah.
says that it's this thing and it's not that thing, and that
Yeah.
thing is kind of part of the problem. But we're going to call it this thing, and if each piece of the puzzle is doing something like that, that feels like a really lovely, powerful thing. It's also a symbol of construction, bringing bits together. It's often a collective thing. Families sit around and do them together, or communities do them. And everyone knows what one is. You don't need to then have a subline, a subtitle that says, well, actually, a jigsaw is this thing. Everyone knows what it is.
Yeah.
So it's a great choice of a cultural symbol, it strikes me.
And there's no problem mentioned in it. So I only talk about the solution. So for example, the sharing economy, I paint a picture of every neighborhood having a local library of things. So you can clear your house of all clutter and get access to what you want when you want it with no need to insure, dust, clean, fix, maintain, and these things will take off once they, have enough input, or
Brilliant.
on demand, like public transport, like Uber, but with buses. So cheap and convenient. You don't need your own car, and rural economies are transformed, and the air is clean. And so I paint the positive vision to try and build that desire, and then show actually what exists right now and what are the structural corner components that will need to really kickstart it and scale up.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thanks very much. Well, I'll look forward to seeing that come, and I shall certainly follow it closely. I'm sure the listeners and viewers will do as well. Let's come to some quick fire things towards the end. Your prouds. A couple of things or a thing against the odds, something that you've kind of achieved. What would you put? I mean, you've talked a lot about all sorts of
Yeah.
things. They're all
Well, I'm proud of Habitat Man and my play, but I think one of the things against the odds is something I've not talked about yet, was my sustainable hairdressing project. And I won an award for that, which I was really, really pleased for impact. But I like the idea because hairdressers talk to more people than any other group. And actually, hair care can be really high carbon intensive, like hot water. It's very energy intensive. So just promoting the, less hot water, less chemicals, better for the hair, the skin, the bills, your time, and so on. But what I wanted to do was create a sustainable salon certification and a sustainable stylist certification. And I was running around asking the Hair and Beauty Industry Authority, the National Hair Federation. Everyone said, yeah, good idea, good idea. Looking for permission, looking for someone to take it on. And then I just thought, sod it, why didn't I just do it?
just do it first and then
So
ask permission later. Yes.
I just
Yeah.
took this virtual salon training thing that was free, basically. You can go through and it's like almost gamified where you learn how to be a sustainable hairdresser. And it just sort of works by itself. Stylists can do it. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes. If they get an answer wrong on the question, we just tell them the right answer. So we can validate that they've done the training. We can't validate they took it in. But if a salon can show all their stylists have done the training, they get a certificate. So it's kind of automated, low cost. It's not like an exam with all the costs of that. But it is quite a lot. And we've had thousands of sustainable stylists sign up. We've got hundreds of sustainable salons. And I think it was just the fact of just deciding, I don't think there's anything stopping me
Yes.
from just doing this.
Yes, but
And
isn't that interesting? That's a lovely observation that we
yeah,
think there's something stopping us
yeah,
when there's a kind of when we have an idea and we want to do
yeah,
something, cultural norms, other people's ideas, shame or pride, or all
yeah,
sorts of kind of feeling-based things. And sometimes it's best just do it, just get on
yeah.
and do it, see what happens. Yeah. So.
People just accepted it and it's taken off. So yeah, I thought you'd like that.
Fantastic. A heroine or a hero, or maybe it's a heroic community rather than individual, because it's not always down to individuals. But who?
Well,
What would you
I'm
point
going
to?
to do an individual. Caroline Lucas is my role model. So, she was for a long time the only Green MP. But I remember, like, if I hear question time in the background, they'd always, every time she was on, I think, who's that? That's the only person talking sense here. And so many politicians, they will denigrate or they use very emotive language to try and get their point over, like, oh, snake oil salesman or fairy tale spinner. But she'll just tell it like it is. And she's always right. And never a hair out of place. So calm. I mean, she's just amazing. So I've always looked up to her.
Great, great. She'll be pleased to hear that. I'll make sure she does. A key book or cultural item to recommend. Um,
Okay, so I've been hugely inspired by Rob Hopkins. So I do love his book, How to Fall in Love with the Future. Now, I was already doing all the positive story stuff before he started doing his stuff, but it was his idea of imagining that flourishing future that really inspired the idea of the picture on the front of the jigsaw. So I owe that to him. And I think the work he does in changing the narrative from what we want to run away from to what we want to run towards is absolutely essential. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who's been inspired by him.
Brilliant. Exactly. All the transition movement, all the transition towns that have come from his ideas. Uh, Your recent creation to recommend? Well, we've talked of a number actually, but
Well, there's
do you
another
want to
one.
point?
So we not talked about The Philosopher and the Assassin. So that sort of campus novel, obviously, I'm an academic, so it reflects some of that. And it's about a business ethics lecturer who, disenchanted with business, joins arts and humanities to become professor of moral philosophy. And then she's posed with this ultimate dilemma. And she doesn't know what to do, so she engages her students in the class to work on it. And she writes this story about a murder in the Citizens' Assembly on climate, basically drawing on my play as a story within a story. So it's kind of part campus novel, part philosophy lectures, and part whodunit. And they're all three strands are sort of woven in, and that's my latest creation.
Lovely, fantastic. And one top action for people. What can they do now, having listened to this?
Okay, well, I mean, I do want to say things like buy my books and sign up to my Jigsaw newsletter, but I won't. I think walking more lightly on the earth and just sharing that mentality with others. Just in terms of whether you're putting pesticides on your garden or sit, under a hot power shower, pouring chemicals and hot water into your skin, which is destroying all the friendly bacteria that keeps your skin young. Most of these things are better for you anyway, but they're certainly better for the planet. And I have to say, I am such a convert to solar panels. I got some last year, and I wish now I'd have got them years ago because I was always focusing on the financial payback. And one time it was like 7 years. Then energy prices went up and suddenly it was 4 years. Then energy prices bottomed out and it was 10 years. And it's because I got a north facing roof and I always sort of did it on that. But my bills have gone down from £180 a month to 18. And I had a power cut the other day and my freezer didn't go off because I could just plug it in the solar circuit. And I didn't count on my feeling of connection with the sun. I suddenly felt intimately connected to the planet and the sun. And there was so much there that I hadn't counted on. That feeling of smugness when there was a power cut, that feeling of resilience, that sense of connection, that sense the whole world could go tits up. I still get my energy direct from the sun with no one interfering. No one can put that price up. And so I just think if you're going to do it now, because energy prices are going to soar now with all this business going on with Iran. And just enjoy the benefits as of any way you can or get a grant. It's
Yeah.
worth it.
Bill McKibben's book that came out last year called "Here Comes the Sun," the
Brilliant
US
book.
journalist. Gorgeous because he just says the same as what you've just said about turning to face the sun and feeling different about that, and this expansion of plug-in solar that's happening across a lot of Europe. Not yet in Britain. We're a bit slow on that, but allowing people who live in flats to put them on their balconies. In Germany, in 1 year, 1.5 million people bought them and put them on their flats, and it's reduced energy use, importantly for the country, but saves people money. So yes, it's
Plants
changing,
are
isn't it?
literary, aren't they? Because you can't store it. So much power and misuse of power has come from storing up wealth from fossil fuels. This gives power to people, not to, power hungry people, organizations. So I think maybe that's why they're fighting it so hard, because it makes financial sense to go renewable.
It
So the
does.
fact we haven't gone faster, I think there's a little bit more. Maybe they're afraid of us taking that power for ourselves. But I'm loving them. So that's my
Great, lovely way to finish, Denise. Thank you very much indeed, Denise Baden. Thank you for coming on the pod. It's been a lovely pleasure to hear from that range of things that you've been working on. Good luck in the future. We'll put the important links in the show notes so people can follow up on all of those lovely ways to engage with your work. And thank you.
Thanks for having me.